Welcome to Vanguard, where humans aren't the underdogs. We're the endgame. Enjoy the journey. In the heart of Galactic Sector 69, a stretch of lawless stars and megalomaniacal empires, the ancient space station outpost X-17 floated like a rusted god's forgotten chess piece. It was a melting pot of smugglers, merchants, mercenaries, philosophers, exotic dancers, and the occasional drunk mechanic. It was also inexplicably home to one of the last sacred arenas in the galaxy, a shimmering coliseum from a bygone era where warriors still settled matters of pride and dominance, not with blasters, but with blades, fists, and honor. Of course, Tim Lancaster knew none of this. Not at that moment anyway. He was currently nursing a hangover so catastrophic it deserved its own name, something like the atomic skull imploder. His skull throbbed with each beat of the nearby synth-bass music pulsing from open market stalls, and his mouth tasted like he'd licked the inside of an ion capacitor. 7 hours of drinking Zorgian quantum tequila at his friend Zul's birthday had broken several of his internal systems, and possibly a few laws of physics. Never again, Tim groaned, dragging his boots across the glowing floor tiles of the promenade. His hair was a disaster, his shirt was stained with a suspicious purple liquid, and his eyes were locked on the holographic comic floating just above his wristband. Classic Serafina Caldwell, he chuckled, thumbing through the newest issue of the Caldwell Family Adventures. In it, the legendary artifact finders turned chaos-causing interstellar heroes were navigating a trans-dimensional toilet that had opened a time loop in a sanitation bay. Tim laughed out loud at a panel of Derek Caldwell being chased by sentient plungers. The Caldwells, as far as he was concerned, were the real gods of the galaxy. That's when the crowd roared. Tim didn't look up. Another cheer, louder. He frowned, annoyed. The comic was finally getting to the part where Serafina reverse-engineered a cosmic dog whistle into a space-folding grenade. Whatever local drama was happening could wait. Unfortunately, fate had other plans. A surge of bodies pressed toward the central concourse, alien limbs, scaled tails, antennae, even one being that seemed to be composed entirely of fog. A crowd had formed around the entrance to the Coliseum of Echo's Outpost X-17's ancient combat arena. Its dome roof shimmered with energy fields and faded royal crests lit by pulses of long-forgotten rituals still embedded in the metal walls. "What's all this?" Tim muttered, craning his neck. The crowd's density made movement difficult, but his curiosity, ever the villain, dragged him forward. Inside the arena, standing over the unconscious body of an 8-foot-tall Cranthian bruiser, was a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a fantasy holodrama. She was a vision of paradox violence wrapped in elegance, menace dressed in allure. Her violet skin glistened under the arena lights, taut over lean muscle and feminine curves. She wore a form of battle armor so revealing it could have been sold in an upscale nightclub. Yet the way she moved in, it was all business. And then he saw her eyes, bright emerald green, glowing with a radiance that seemed to slice through the souls of onlookers. "Is there no one else?" her voice rang out. Soft, musical, but laced with thunder. "Will no champion face Arya Donnell, Royal Guard, captain of the Loendarian Empire?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even the crowd seemed to collectively hold its breath. No one dared move. No one except Tim, who promptly snorted at a panel in his comic where Derek Caldwell accidentally activated a time-looped fart generator. Unfortunately for him, Arya heard it. "You dare laugh at my challenge," she growled, her eyes snapping to Tim like heat-seeking missiles. Tim looked up slowly, confused. "Huh. Oh, no, not you, this comic, see?" He held up his wrist. "Derek's in the middle of wait. What?" Boom! A thunderous voice erupted from the arena's automated speaker system. "Challenger identified." "What?" No, Tim stammered, his wristband flickering in panic. "That's not, I was just reading." Too late. The crowd had already surged back, cheering madly. Security drones circled overhead, shepherding Tim toward the arena gates like he was a VIP, or more accurately, a sacrificial offering. "Sons of glitching bastards," Tim muttered under his breath as he stumbled into the arena. "I just wanted to read in peace." Arya stood waiting, blades drawn, her figure statuesque beneath the Colosseum's energy grid. "You," she said, arching a perfect purple eyebrow, "a human. This is who dares face the champion of Loandaria. Tim blinked at her, then blinked at the crowd, then back to her cleavage, then hastily tried to blink back at her eyes. Listen, he began, holding up his hands. There's been a massive tequila-induced misunderstanding. I'm Tim. I fix broken stuff. On ships. And occasionally break myself in drinking contests. I don't duel warrior princesses. Her gaze sharpened. You mock our sacred rituals. Tim squinted at her, swaying slightly. I mock nobody. I just wanted to see if Serafina Caldwell could reverse the polarity of the neutron flow before her brother gets eaten by a trans-dimensional slug. Is that so wrong? Arya stepped forward with deadly grace, her swords glowing with crackling energy. I have slain 3,000 challengers, she said coldly. I have bowed to no one, and by Loandarian law, I must accept at all combatants. Prepare to die. Tim sighed, still not shutting off his comic. Violet, please, he said, backing away. Can't we just have a cup of synth coffee and call it a draw? But the blades were already coming. Arya lunged. The first blade whistled past Tim's cheek, sizzling the air where his head had been a second earlier. His hangover vanished instantly, replaced by pure survival instinct, the kind honed not in battlefields but in dive bars where unpaid tabs turned into flying chairs. Okay, not talking time anymore, he yelped, diving sideways just in time to avoid a sweeping arc of violet energy. To his credit, Tim moved like a man used to being chased by security by exes by angry station chefs, whose ovens he accidentally rewired into fusion bombs. But dodging a Loandarian royal guard with twin energy blades was next level. Arya's strikes came fast, precise, and utterly merciless. The crowd roared with bloodlust. Each move she made was poetry in motion if the poem involved death and cleavage. Stand still and die with honor, Arya commanded, spinning with impossible grace. I'd rather live with mild embarrassment, Tim shouted, ducking under another slash and rolling toward a scattered pile of debris. His hand closed around something, a fragment of bleached bone likely from the Cranthian Arya had just flattened. He held it up like a dagger, squinting. Is this ceremonial? Is this your version of a white flag? She didn't answer. Instead, she executed a backflip landing with a crash that shattered the nearby control panel. Showers of sparks erupted from ancient circuits. Tim backed away, clutching the bone fragment like a nervous wizard about to summon sarcasm. All right, time out. Please tell me your culture has a timeout rule, or I don't know, a safe word. Arya didn't respond with words. She came at him in a blur, flying kick, twin blades, a scream that could crack glass. But Tim wasn't standing still anymore. He twisted at the last moment, letting her fly right past him. She crashed shoulder first into the still sparking control panel. Warning anomaly detected. Emergency gravity reversal initiated. What the? Boom! The arena shifted. Tim found himself floating weightless, suspended like laundry in zero-G. Across from him, Arya flailed midair, her momentum ruined by the lack of gravity. Their eyes locked for a split second, hers filled with fury, his with, I really didn't mean to do this. Tim, more by accident than design, flipped the bone fragment in his hand. It spun like a dart, flew through the air, and bonked Arya square between the eyes. Her expression froze, utterly dumbfounded. And that's when the gravity returned. Hard. Whomp. Both bodies slammed into the floor. Tim landed on his feet by sheer dumb luck, wobbling slightly like a newborn giraffe in cargo pants. Arya didn't. She landed on one knee, stunned. Her weapons clattered to the floor. For a long, breathless moment, she stared at Tim. Then, ding! Combat concluded. Challenger victorious. Tim blinked. Wait, what? The arena went silent. Even the crowd seemed unsure how to react. Did the idiot just win? Arya's face twisted through multiple emotions, shock, disbelief, then something far deeper. Her blades powered down with a hiss. She stood slowly, eyes locked on him, like a storm gathering over calm water. He raised a hand. Look, I'm really sorry. Can we just call this a weird misunderstanding? And she fell to one knee, in front of him, head bowed. I, Arya Delangel of the royal bloodline, she said solemnly, pledge my service and obedience to you, my conqueror. Your will shall be my command until death releases me from this bond. The arena exploded with noise. Tim stood frozen in place, jaw dropped open like a broken loading ramp. What? No, absolutely not. That's not necessary. I'm just a guy. A mechanic. I lost my shirt yesterday in a poker game with a telepathic sponge. Arya remained kneeling. It is law, it is ancient, and it is sealed by combat. The word sealed hadn't even finished leaving her lips before the control panel behind her, still crackling from her earlier impact, pulsed with a sudden energy spike. A brilliant shaft of light erupted from the damaged core, engulfing both of them in a radiant blue-white glow. Tim screamed, not like a manly scream, more like a guy who just realized he was standing on a toaster when it was set to cremate. Pain lanced through his back, his spine burning like someone had welded a plasma coil directly into it. And just as fast as it had come, the light vanished. Tim collapsed to one knee, panting. Arya, still kneeling, slowly raised her head. Her eyes had changed. Still glowing green, but now with a deeper, almost celestial radiance. Her expression, once cold and dutiful, now held hunger. The binding ritual, she whispered, her voice husky, it is complete. Tim's face went pale. Wait, what do you mean binding, like a metaphorical bond or... We are joined, she purred, stepping forward with a slowness that was somehow more terrifying than her earlier attacks. By magic, by combat, and now by need. Oh, Arya reached for his hand, lifted it gently, and placed it on her collarbone. Her pulse throbbed beneath his fingers, rapid, wild, like a hummingbird trying to escape a cage. You feel it, she said. Tim swallowed hard. Yup, sure do. Also, I really need a drink. You need more than that, Arya replied, leaning in. The binding creates urges, urges that must be satisfied. Tim let out a long, slow breath, and I thought Zul's party was weird. Tim Lancaster had been through a lot of weird mornings. There was the time he woke up on a pirate cruiser wearing nothing but a broken translator and a sombrero. Another when he found himself spooning a six-legged bartender after losing a bet on quantum dice. But this morning, this one won. Hands down, zero competition. He awoke feeling like he'd been both steamrolled by a hover freighter and given the best massage of his life simultaneously. Every nerve in his body tingled like they'd been rewired with silk and caffeine. He was warm, sore, and incredibly aware of the violet-skinned alien goddess curled against his side. Arya Delanjo, the woman who tried to decapitate him less than 24 hours ago. Now she was sprawled beside him, barely covered in one of his oversized work shirts, which on her towering athletic frame qualified more as a provocative suggestion than actual clothing. Her hair spilled across the pillow like liquid starlight, and her skin shimmered faintly in the filtered glow of the station's artificial sunrise. Tim blinked slowly. Nope, definitely still dreaming. Your thirst requires attention, master. He nearly fell off the bed. Arya stood in the doorway to his cramped kitchenette, holding a steaming mug of something that smelled suspiciously like actual earth coffee. Where he spluttered trying to sit up. That's real coffee, like from Earth. That stuff is worth more than plasma coils out here. She approached each step, the perfect marriage of grace and lethal poise, like a dancer who moonlighted as a war machine. I have many skills beyond warfare, she said softly, offering the mug. Your satisfaction is now my duty. In all things. Tim took the coffee with trembling hands. Well, okay, that's only mildly terrifying. She smiled, then slid onto the bed with the kind of predatory smoothness that made his pulse spike. He sipped his coffee, immediately burning his tongue just to distract himself. You slept well? Arya said, not as a question, but a statement of fact. He coughed. I think slept is a generous term for what happened last night. Bits and pieces were blurry. He remembered being yanked into a vortex of light, the searing heat along his spine, the way Arya's eyes glowed like emerald fire as she kissed him with something that was not part of any basic first aid protocol. Also, the sounds and the positions, and nope, better not replay all that just yet. He reached back and scratched the base of his spine where a dull throbbing echoed with every beat of his heart. The second he touched it, a pulse of energy coursed up through his body, sending a jolt of pleasure that made him spill half his coffee on the sheets. What the hell, he muttered. Arya's expression softened, her eyes glowing brighter. You bear the mark. Tim scrambled for the small mirror mounted beside his bunk. He turned around, lifting his shirt. What he saw made him freeze. At the base of his spine was a glowing symbol, not tattooed, not etched, but woven into the skin itself with faintly shifting lines of blue light. It pulsed softly like it was alive. It looked both ancient and futuristic, like a sigil drawn by a god who had access to nanotechnology. The artifact of binding Arya whispered behind him. It fuses to the victor in sacred combat, a relic older than the stars. It connects us body, soul, and will. Tim turned slowly. So you're saying, I've got a magic butt tattoo that means we're permanently quantum married. Her gaze didn't waver. Essentially, yes. Oh, cool. Just checking. Arya leaned closer, tracing a fingertip along the glowing mark. Tim jolted as another wave of heat surged through him, leaving him breathless. It ensures my complete devotion, she murmured, and enhances compatibility. Tim groaned, part agony, part ecstasy. Lady, if you keep touching that, I'm going to pass out from sheer overload. She smiled wickedly. Then I shall refrain, for now. He collapsed backward onto the bed, fanning himself with a maintenance manual. You Lowendarians really don't mess around with foreplay, do you? Arya climbed up beside him and gently took the book away. Combat is foreplay in our culture. Neat, Tim wheezed. Remind me to never date more than one of you at once. Arya looked amused, almost content. She rested her head on his chest, her hand lightly tracing circles over his ribs. For a moment it was quiet, peaceful. Then bang, bang, bang. The door reverberated with pounding fists. Tim groaned, pressing his face into her hair. Ignore it. Probably someone from the air recycling charity again. Arya tensed instantly, sitting up, every muscle taut. No, that rhythm, those are war knocks. Lowendarian elite guard. He blinked. You guys have a knocking rhythm for elite troops. She was already off the bed, naked and radiant like some wrathful space goddess. They've come for me. Tim propped himself up, wincing as his spine pulsed in response to her sudden departure from bed. Let me guess your mom sent backup. Arya's face darkened as she pulled on her battle armor, the gleaming plates somehow highlighting her figure instead of hiding it. No, she said grimly. My mother would demand I return by honor. But this smells like Tarsus. Tim's brow furrowed. Tarsus, my cousin, she said, voice sharp. Regent only in title and only because the high matriarch is away. He's long sought control in me. Tim's comic book from last night still sat beside the bed. He looked at it longingly, sighed, and stood up. So we've got a jealous ex, political treachery, elite troops outside the door, and an ancient artifact bonding me to a hyper-athletic alien princess with trust issues. He stretched his arms lazily. Yup, definitely not getting back to sleep today. Arya snapped her energy blades into place. Command me, master. I will eliminate them all. Tim smiled faintly. After last night, I'd feel guilty sending you to work alone. He pulled on a pair of wrinkled cargo pants and cracked his neck. Besides, this is still my station. Arya blinked. You would defend me. Of course, he said, moving toward the door. What kind of guy lets someone else clean up their intergalactic in-law problem? The banging on the door had escalated to full-on seismic assault. Sparks burst from the old control panel as a high-powered energy blast rippled through the reinforced alloy. Arya had her swords drawn poised like a goddess of war mid-lunge. Her green eyes glowed with battle-lust muscles, flexed armor tight, breath controlled, deadly, perfect. Tim Lancaster, meanwhile, stood barefoot in wrinkled cargo pants, hair a mess, still tasting coffee on his tongue. All right, he said, voice calm. Here's the plan. Arya nodded, ready for orders. You, Tim pointed, go shower. Her eyes widened in disbelief. What? I'll handle this. You're still glowing from last night, and I really don't want you going into battle, Sticky. Sticky, I am royal blood, I do not. Princess, that's an order, he said, his voice suddenly firm. Arya froze. There was something in his tone, not mockery, not laziness, but command, pure and simple. It shocked her into silence. Then, her eyes darkened, and she smiled. As you command, master. She vanished into the tiny shower unit with a hiss of steam and a swish of hips that would have made a priest renounce vows. Tim ran a hand through his hair and sighed. I can't believe I'm doing this. He strolled to the door and input the override code. With a pneumatic hiss, the panel slid open to reveal 6 Loendarian elite guards in full ceremonial battle armor, violet exosuits etched with glowing green runes, each carrying plasma blades the size of Tim's leg. The one in front, taller than the others with a scar cutting through her left eye, stepped forward, blade humming. "This," she said with open contempt, "is the creature who defeated our princess." Tim raised a lazy hand in greeting. "Yo, I would have cleaned up if I'd known I was having company, but your princess has been keeping me occupied," the warriors growled. The leader's face twisted into fury. "You dare speak of her that way, human filth." She swung her blade in a blur. Tim tilted his head slightly. The blade missed by a millimeter. Her momentum carried her forward just a touch too far, and that was all he needed. With casual grace, Tim reached out and tapped her sternum with an open palm. A crack of force rang out like thunder. She flew backward like a comet, slamming into the corridor wall hard enough to dent the alloy. Her blade clattered across the floor. The other 5 hesitated. Then trained instincts took over. They attacked as one precision formation, synchronized movements. It should have been beautiful. It was also completely useless. Tim grabbed the nearest object in reach, a mop. An old half-broken mop with a metal handle and a bucket wheel that squeaked like dying crickets. He spun it once experimentally. Then all hell broke loose. The corridor became a blur of bodies and blurs of mop fury. Tim twisted, ducked, parried plasma blades with the mop handle, tripped a soldier with the bucket's base, spun the stick over his back, and delivered a perfect bowstaff slam into another warrior's ribs. Sparks flew, helmets cracked, armor dented. One warrior reached for a grenade. Tim jabbed the mop into her visor and used the momentum to flip her over his shoulder. Another tried a drop kick. Tim blocked with the metal mop pole and countered with a two-handed sweep that sent her crashing into a ventilation shaft. 30 seconds later, 5 elite soldiers lay moaning on the floor. Tim knelt beside their leader, now barely conscious. He grasped her chin, lifting it so she was forced to look into his eyes. Gone was the lazy smile. Gone was the comic-loving goofball. His voice dropped to a whisper, low, cold, absolute. "Sweetheart," he said, "you're ruining what was shaping up to be a really excellent morning with a truly extraordinary woman." The leader swallowed hard. "I don't give a damn who you are or what orders you were following. If you knock on my door before I've had my breakfast again, I won't be this merciful." He dropped her gently to the ground. "You have 60 seconds to disappear." He stood up, mop still in hand, and turned his back. The 6 elite warriors scrambled to their feet with varying levels of panic, gathered their weapons, and retreated like ghosts into the corridor. The door closed behind them with a polite chime. Tim leaned the mop against the wall and exhaled slowly. A moment later, the shower door slid open. Steam billowed out. Arya emerged wrapped in a towel so small it probably violated several galactic modesty codes. She blinked at the empty corridor. "What happened to the elite guard?" Tim yawned, stretching his back. "Them... Oh, we had a chat. They left." Arya's gaze scanned the room. Disbelief written all over her face. "You talked them down." He shrugged. "I can be very persuasive." She stared for a second longer, then walked forward, one drop of water sliding down her collarbone. Tim followed the droplet with his eyes like it was falling in slow motion. She leaned in close. "You are not what I expected." Tim grinned. "Yeah, I get that a lot." He reached for her towel. She didn't stop him. Arya lay on her side, propped up on one elbow, watching him. Tim was fast asleep beside her, one arm draped across his eyes, snoring softly in a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like a bad cover of a Zorgian lullaby. His hair was still a mess. His chest rose and fell in that steady, almost lazy way. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, as if he were dreaming of comic books and chili dogs. He looked so harmless. But Arya wasn't fooled. Not anymore. She rose silently, slipping out from under the sheets without disturbing him. Her bare feet made no sound as she crossed to the cramped workstation tucked into the corner of the suite. Tim's personal device sat there unlocked. Typical human overconfidence. She activated the holographic interface, fingers gliding across the controls. The display flickered to life. And for a second, just one, she saw a name that made her breath catch in her throat. Clint Caldwell. It vanished almost immediately, replaced by the normal user tag Tim L., Mechanic Outpost X-17. But she had seen it. Caldwell. The name was legend in the Empire. In every empire. A family of myth, of power, of dangerous ancient tech. The ones who didn't just use artifacts, they made them. Caldwells weren't born. They were summoned by the galaxy when it needed chaos wrapped in charm. She turned off the interface and returned to bed. Tim shifted but didn't wake. She watched him for a long time. That's when it hit her. He wanted to be underestimated. He cultivated it, the slouch, the sarcasm, the laziness. It wasn't carelessness, it was armor. And if her suspicions were right, he wasn't just some lucky idiot who tripped into a sacred bond. He was the last Caldwell. The real question was, why was he hiding? The next morning, Arya tried to act casual. Tim didn't seem to notice. He was too busy trying to convince a vending machine to give him double rations of Choco Crunchos without charging extra. "Come on, baby," he whispered to the console. "Give Daddy a win today." The machine beeped angrily and spat out a packet of broccoli-flavored protein bricks. Tim stared at it like it had personally insulted him. "You betray me," he whispered. Arya cleared her throat. Tim turned, holding the sad protein bar like a dead rodent. "Hey, you're up. Want half this crime against breakfast?" "I'll pass," she said dryly. They sat in silence for a few minutes on the small balcony of their suite, watching the starfield shift as Outpost X-17 rotated slowly through the orbital ring. Then Arya finally said it. "You move like a warrior." Tim took a bite of the bar and winced. "I move like someone with back problems and commitment issues. You defeated 6 of my elite guard with a mop. It was a very nice mop. You know Loendarian combat rhythms. You recognize their formation mid-attack." He paused. "That's a lucky guess. You used the inverted pulse redirect step. That technique was banned after the Void Wars." Tim looked up at her. She stared back unblinking. "Who are you really, Tim?" He chewed slowly, swallowed, took a long sip of synth juice. Then finally said, "Does it matter?" Arya didn't break eye contact. "It might, when Tarsus finds us." Tim leaned back in his chair, letting the sunlight catch the edges of his face. "I'm just a guy who got lucky enough to catch the eye of the most beautiful warrior princess in the galaxy." Her heart fluttered. Damn him for saying it like that. But he continued, "If you really want the truth." He stood and walked to the storage cabinet. From it, he pulled a small, matte black case. Something about it buzzed in her mind, a relic, a lockbox, a shape half remembered from Empire records. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside was a bracelet, simple, unassuming, until it flickered with energy runes dancing along its surface. The kind of energy that made battle-hardened soldiers kneel without knowing why. Tim slipped it on. The moment it touched his skin, the entire station seemed to shift. Pressure changed. Static danced across the balcony's glass. Arya stood slowly. That's not possible." Tim looked at her eyes, suddenly ancient and sharp. "My real name," he said quietly, "is Clint Caldwell." Her knees almost gave out. "You're him," she whispered. He raised a brow. "Depends on which him you mean." "The man who ended the quantum wars, negotiated the Andromedan Accord, rewired the cradle engine during the collapse." "Yeah," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "That was a rough week." Arya just stared. "You could have told me." "I didn't want to," he said honestly. "I just wanted to fix stuff. Live quiet, read comics, maybe meet someone interesting in a cosmic accident." She walked up to him, hand on his chest. "You're a myth." "I'm also very good at pancakes," he said with a grin. She shook her head, laughing despite herself. But before either of them could say more, the comm console blared. A priority signal. The station-wide feed lit up with the Loendarian royal crest. Then came the voice. "Tarsus," Arya growled. Tim looked at her calmly. "Time to say hi to the in-laws." She cracked her neck. "I'll get my swords." He opened the case further. Under the bracelet was a different artifact, one Arya didn't recognize. He slipped it into his pocket and whispered, "Not swords this time." She blinked, then what? Tim smiled. "Let's change the game." The face of Regent Tarsus filled every screen on Outpost X-17, towering, regal, furious. The broadcast cut through all frequencies like a royal blade. Merchants froze mid-haggle, drunk sobered. Even mercenaries paused mid-fistfight. Citizens of Outpost X-17 and honored guests, Tarsus declared his voice as oily as it was imperial. "I bring word from the throne of Loendaria." Arya stood beside Tim in their suite, her arms crossed, jaw clenched. My cousin, she muttered, is about to weaponize his own ego. Tarsus continued. An individual named Tim Lancaster, known criminal and deceiver, has abducted our noble princess, Arya Donnelhell, by trickery and false victory. He has violated sacred codes and imperial honor. Tim sipped his synth juice. Man, I hate how every time someone's mad at me, they make me sound cooler. Let it be known, Tarsus growled, that a bounty of 1 billion credits is now placed upon his head. Dead or alive. Preferably, inconveniently alive. The image flickered out. There was a long pause. Tim whistled. Well, that's going to ruin our dinner plans. The first bounty hunter showed up within hours. A Greenian tracker with a cybernetic snout. A pair of cloaked monks who could bend space-time just by arguing about it. A smiling assassin with eyes like frozen stars. They arrived silently, lurking, watching. None of them attacked. Not one. They spotted Tim. Locked eyes measured, calculated. Then turned around and left. Arya was livid. They're stalling, waiting for backup, coordinating a strike. Tim sprawled on the couch, reading the latest issue of Caldwell and Co. Just shrugged. Nah, they felt the bracelet. She eyed him. You think that's enough? He winked. You'd be surprised how often cosmic reputation beats actual strategy. By the third day, Outpost X-17's docks were full. Dozens of ships, hunters, assassins, glory seekers, every quadrant's deadliest, greediest, and most insane had gathered. Still no one made a move. They watched, waited, whispered. Arya and Tim strolled the marketplace holding hands eating candied plasma fruit. Tim waved at the sniper on the roof. The sniper waved back nervously. Arya hissed under her breath. This is unnatural. Welcome to the Caldwell effect, Tim replied, licking the juice off his fingers. People don't know what I'll do, so they assume the worst. On the fourth night, Arya confronted him. You're enjoying this, she accused. They stood in the panoramic observation chamber, the station's twin moons rising outside. I'm enjoying not being shot at, Tim replied. You should be panicking, she said. Any minute someone might realize you're bluffing. He turned to her, suddenly serious. I'm not bluffing. She blinked. The mood shifted. Tim stepped closer, took her hands in his. Look, I didn't ask for this mess, but Tarsus made it personal, and he should have known better. Arya's breath caught. What are you planning? Tim grinned. Something stupid, probably heroic, very human. Meanwhile, aboard the Loendarian warship, Violet Vengeance Tarsus slammed his fist into the arm of his throne. Insects, he roared, he's just a human. Why does no one move against him? His military aide, Commander Haya, knelt at his feet. Your Excellency, there are rumors that the artifact he bears is a trick, Tarsus spat, but his voice trembled. He remembered the old legends, the whispers, the man who vanished after the Quantum War. The one they said made machines kneel. Tarsus growled. Fine, if they won't take him, we'll flush him out. The next day, as Tim and Arya shared a quiet breakfast on their balcony, the Violet Vengeance descended into low orbit. Its shadow fell across Outpost X-17 like the hand of a vengeful god. Arya stood instantly. That ship could vaporize this station. Tim chewed a bite of toast. You worry too much. He's here, with the guard. If he fired, he won't. Not with you on board. Tim stood dusted crumbs off his pants and walked to the suite's central console. Time to give him what he wants. Arya tensed. We're not surrendering. Tim didn't look back. I know. He tapped a hidden command. The bracelet on his wrist pulsed once, then twice. Throughout the station, every communicator lit up with a single line. Come to the plaza. It's showtime. Clint C. When Tim stepped into the plaza, Arya beside him, the entire station was already there. Bounty hunters, mercs, civilians, even station security. And at the far end, descending theatrically from his ship, Tarsus flanked by a dozen elite guards. He strutted forward, arrogance dripping from every motion. Princess Arya, he called, return now and I shall spare your pet a messy death. Arya's blades hummed to life. I am bound by sacred law. You know this. Tarsus sneered. That farce of a duel, that glitch in the arena. It was a mockery. He turned to the crowd. 1 billion credits. End this clown and collect your fortune. Silence. No one moved. Tarsus looked around. What are you waiting for? All eyes turned to Tim, who sighed dramatically, stepped forward and said, they're waiting for me to give permission. Tarsus blinked. What? A subtle pressure filled the air. Then, the entire crowd knelt. Assassins, warriors, killers, even station guards. All bowed. A low murmur rippled through the silence. "Forgive us, Master." Tim smirked. "Took you long enough." Tarsus stood frozen in the middle of the plaza, his cape fluttering dramatically in the wind, yet all theatrics fell flat in the face of what he was seeing. Every bounty hunter he had summoned, every assassin he'd lured with the promise of credits and power, was now kneeling to the man he had offered 1,000,000,000 credits to kill. To a human. To Tim Lancaster. No Clint Caldwell. The name rippled through the plaza like a forgotten prophecy suddenly remembered. Tim turned slowly, the bracelet on his wrist glowing faintly. His expression was casual, even bored, as if he'd done this exact thing before, and it barely registered as interesting. Tarsus barked, voice cracking with desperation. This is madness. Do you all not see? He's just playing you?" One of the kneeling warriors, Cracks the Disemballer a Merc, known for turning enemies into abstract sculptures, growled without rising. "We see more than you ever did, Regent." Beside him, the famed assassin Dresda, whose kisses killed more leaders than bullets, bowed her head. "Master Caldwell," she whispered. "Had we known, we would not have hesitated." Arya looked around in astonishment. Even she hadn't expected this level of reverence. It wasn't just fear, it was loyalty. Ancient, earned, absolute. Tarsus's voice broke. You're all mad. He's just some overhyped mechanic." Tim chuckled. "Wrong again, cousin-in-law." He stepped forward, gently guiding Arya behind him, not out of condescension, but as if preparing the stage for a final move. "I usually go by Tim these days," he said, casually cracking his knuckles. Tim the mechanic. Tim the guy who dodges taxes and drinks too much coffee. He looked directly at Tarsus. "But you have poked the wrong bear." Tarsus snarled. "You think I fear you?" "No," Tim said softly. "You fear what I represent." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a data crystal. "This is proof," he said, holding it up, "of your illegal regency, of your sabotage of the High Matriarch's communications, of your failed attempts to assassinate Arya during her off-world deployments, even forged binding records to claim her as future queen without her consent." He tossed the crystal onto the ground. It skidded to Tarsus's feet. "Oops," Tim added. "Hope it didn't scratch." The silence shattered when 10 bounty hunters leapt forward, not to attack Tim, but to seize Tarsus. "What are you doing?" Tarsus screeched. "I paid you." A grizzled merc with half a cybernetic skull leaned in. "And Caldwell just unpaid you." In full. They bound him in ion cuffs, laced with truth seal runes, tech outlawed by most star systems. The crowd parted instinctively, making way for justice. Arya walked up beside Tim, her eyes never leaving Tarsus. "By sacred law and Loendarian code," she said coldly, "you are hereby stripped of title, rank, and freedom." Tarsus howled as he was dragged away. "You think this changes anything I was meant to rule? She was mine, you can't." Arya cut him off without raising her voice. "You never earned me." He did. Tim raised an eyebrow. "Technically, I accidentally earned you, but I'll take it." The crowd chuckled even as Tarsus was hauled toward a waiting ship. His screams faded with the hiss of the docking doors. Silence returned heavy and reverent. Then someone shouted from the back, "Clint, you bastard! Where have you been?" The crowd turned. A massive figure emerged, barrel-chested, cybernetic eye-whirring cape half-burned and reeking of at least 3 illegal liquors. He carried a bottle of Jovian whiskey like it was a war trophy. Arya tensed. "Who?" Tim broke into a grin. "General Thorgon Jed. The infamous Hammer of Antares, slayer of fleets, and drunk uncle to every intergalactic conflict in the last 2 decades, stumbled forward arms wide. You ditched my birthday party to chase tail again. Classic Caldwell." Arya blinked. "He's your friend." Thorgon threw an arm around both of them, nearly flattening Tim in the process. "Not just friends we've destroyed, civilizations together. Started revolutions, ended worse ones." He turned to Arya and squinted. "And you're the Violet Battle babe, huh?" "Hot damn. Caldwell always did have taste. Welcome to the family." Arya tried to maintain composure. Failed. "Thank you, I think." Tim groaned. "Thorgan, what part of undercover don't you understand?" The general blinked, then shrugged. "What you told me to wait until after the 3rd drink to say your name. This is technically the 4th. He offered the bottle to Arya. "Drink." She took it, swigged, didn't flinch. Thorgon nodded in approval. She's a keeper. As the trio walked away from the plaza, the crowd parted for them, silent, respectful. Arya leaned in close. So, you're really Clint Caldwell? Tim looked at her with that familiar smirk. I might have understated my resume. You ended the Quantum Wars. Wasn't alone. You negotiated the Andromedan Treaty. They had good snacks. You rewrote the laws of gravity on Varkon 9. That one was an accident. Arya punched his arm, lightly. He winced. Ow. You could have told me. I liked being Tim, he said, his voice softening. With you. Just Tim. She stared at him, seeing him fully now. Not the myth, not the legend. The man who fought off her elite guard with a mop. The one who made her laugh. Who kissed like a poet and touched like a storm. She reached for his hand, fingers threading into his. I'm glad you're both. The station was buzzing. Tarsus was in chains. The bounty hunters had gone quiet. The mercs were dispersing with a mix of reverence and caution. Yet above them all, the Violet Vengeance, Loendaria's most powerful warship, still loomed in orbit, watching like a coiled predator. Arya paced across their suite's balcony armor, on weapons sharp eyes stormy. He won't let it go, she said. Tarsus may be captured, but the High Matriarch is still off-world. The Empire's laws still list him as regent unless they are updated through direct intervention, which, thanks to your little mic drop moment, he'll try to prevent. Tim leaned back in his chair, one boot on the table, flipping through a beat-up Caldwell Adventures comic. You know what I love about evil aristocrats? Arya glanced at him, irritated. What? They never planned for someone not playing the game at all. He tossed the comic down and stood the bracelet on his wrist pulsing with energy, brighter now. Almost alive. Arya frowned. You're activating the artifact again, aren't you? Yep. What does it do exactly? He smiled. It rewrites things. Arya's expression darkened. That's dangerously vague. It's a Caldwell design, he said with a wink. Vague is part of the fun. They didn't go quietly. Tim and Arya walked straight into the Imperial Summit deck aboard Violet Vengeance, escorted by General Thorgon and a handful of bounty hunters who now apparently worked freelance as Caldwell bodyguards. No one stopped them. Not because they weren't allowed, but because no one wanted to be remembered as the idiot who tried. The command chamber was vast, glowing with blue fire from arcane reactors. Imperial banners lined the walls. At the center stood a projection dais flickering with planetary maps, legal codes, and ancient Loendarian doctrine. Tim stepped into the center, Arya beside him. Let's make this quick, he said. I have a cake to eat later. A hush fell across the deck. Arya raised her voice royal and crisp. By sacred binding and ancestral law, I hereby call for the Corran reversal. Gasps echoed around the room. The Corran reversal, an ancient clause unused for centuries. A way to overturn a regent's authority, but only if invoked by someone both bound by sacred law and empowered by a relic of binding. Everyone turned to Tim, who waved. Hi. The legal AI began scanning him. Tim raised his wrist. The bracelet pulsed. Ping, identity validated. Candidate Clint Caldwell, relationship bound. Then the lights changed. The dais flared with ancient symbols. And then it spoke. Not in a mechanical voice, but in a tone that felt like the bones of the galaxy vibrating. Command accepted. Rewrite initialized. Enter new structure. Arya stepped back. Tim didn't. He held up his hand. By the rights of the victor, by the bond of combat and consent, I invoke the Caldwell Clause. More gasps. Arya stared at him. There's no Caldwell Clause in Loendarian law. Tim grinned. There is now. The artifact flared into blinding blue-white light. Symbols exploded across the chamber. Runes shifted mid-air. The projection screens warped, showing new constitutional structure, lines of logic that had not existed 5 seconds earlier. Law modified, Loendarian succession structure updated. Binding between Clint Caldwell and Princess Arya now recognized as political and spiritual union. Tarsus's regency revoked retroactively. New command structure shared rulership Arya and consort Caldwell. Ratified by artifact authority. Silence. Then the system chimed. All changes final. Tim clapped his hands together. Right then. Who's hungry? Arya just stared at him. You rewrote our entire government in under 30 seconds. Technically 32. I had ceremonial trials planned, legal fights, speeches. Tim shrugged. You can still do all that, just now you don't have to. She stepped closer, eyes narrowed. You're insane. I'm efficient. Arya leaned in, her voice low and dangerous. Don't ever do that again without warning me. Fair, he whispered. Then she grabbed his collar and kissed him. In front of everyone, violently, passionately, like he'd just rewritten the stars for her. Because maybe he had. That night, the station lit up with 1,000 fireworks. Some literal, some figurative. The elite guards bowed to Arya and Tim. The mercenaries toasted his name. Jorah's the bartender declared Clint's night at every bar on the promenade. Even the vending machine finally gave him double rations. In their suite, Arya curled beside him, the artifact at the base of his spine glowing faintly against hers. You changed everything, she murmured. Tim yawned. It needed changing. She traced her fingers across his chest. You didn't just defeat our laws, you conquered them. I prefer massage them with authority, he said. Arya shook her head. You're impossible. He looked at her, smile fading slightly. You still want this? Her answer was simple. She kissed him. Deep, certain, eternal. I want you. Not because of the law, not because of the bond. She pressed her forehead to his. But because somehow in all this chaos, you make me feel like I'm home. Tim exhaled softly, brushing her hair back. Then we rule this chaos together. It was the quiet afterward that hit the hardest. Not the battle, not the spectacle, not even the legal rewriting of a galactic empire. It was the silence, the stillness. Tim and Arya sat on the roof of their sweet legs, dangling over the edge, high above the sparkling lights of Outpost X-17. Below the station buzzed with celebration music and drunk mercs trying to arm wrestle droids. But up here, it was just them and the stars. Tim nursed a bottle of alien champagne someone had dropped off as tribute. Arya leaned against him, still in her light ceremonial armor hair, tousled by the breeze. Neither spoke for a while. It was Arya who broke the silence. I didn't think this is how it would go. Tim raised an eyebrow. The part where I legally became your royal consort using an artifact that technically shouldn't exist. The part, she said slowly, where I wanted it. Tim set the bottle down. She turned to him, eyes shimmering not with power or dominance, but vulnerability, real, raw, and unfiltered. When I first fell, she said, I was ashamed. To be bound, to lose in combat, even to a fluke, was dishonor. Tim waited, letting her speak. But then you didn't take anything. You didn't demand control. You offered pancakes, coffee, laughter. She gave a dry laugh. You fixed a broken heater in my quarters before fixing a political coup. He grinned. I do fix things. Kind of my thing. You made me forget I was conquered. Tim looked at her seriously. Because you weren't. She blinked. I didn't win a prize, Arya, he said. I got lucky. And you? Let me in. That's not a rule, that's a choice. She was quiet for a long moment. Then the artifact. It still glows, even now. Tim nodded, shifting to show the mark at the base of his spine. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat under the skin. Arya touched hers as well. The texts say it links more than body and command. It links essence. The longer it stays, the more we synchronize. Tim glanced at her. You saying we're going to start finishing each other's sentences? I'm saying, she said, I can feel when you're scared. He looked away. Arya reached for his hand. What are you afraid of? Tim exhaled, voice soft. That I don't deserve you. She scoffed. You beat 6 of my elite guards with a mop. He chuckled. Yeah, but the moment I become Clint Caldwell again, things get complicated. I stopped being him years ago. That guy belonged to wars, to councils, to a galaxy begging for miracles. He looked into her eyes. I just want to be Tim, the guy who reads comics, fixes stuff, loves a woman way out of his league. Her breath caught. You love me. Tim hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. Yeah, I do. More than this artifact, more than the throne, more than my old name. He swallowed. You scare the crap out of me, and I'd still choose you, every time. Arya didn't reply. She simply kissed him. Not a kiss of fire or desperation, but something softer, real, grounded. It felt like a beginning. When they broke apart, her voice trembled just slightly. I've never said it, not to anyone. You don't have to, Tim said. But if you ever feel like, I love you. Tim blinked. She smiled. You're not the only one who can take the lead. Then the artifact on their backs pulsed in unison, brighter than ever before. A wave of energy rippled across the rooftop. The lights of the station flickered. For a brief moment, time itself hiccuped. Tim looked at her. Did we just break physics again? Arya was already looking at her hands. No, we unlocked something. A deep tone echoed from the mark on her back, resonating with his. Then a voice. Not from a speaker, not from the skill, but from inside the bond. Connection stable. Mutual synchronization achieved. Initiating phase 2. They both stood bracing for impact, but nothing exploded. Instead, the artifact's glow condensed, forming a symbol mid-air between them. Spinning, ancient, alive. Arya reached out instinctively. Tim caught her wrist. Wait, why? Because once we touch that, I think everything changes. Again, she looked at him, then smiled. We've already changed everything, Tim. This is just us being us. Together, they touched the symbol. It shimmered and vanished. In its place, 2 lines appeared along their spines like mirrored rivers of light. And a whisper only they could hear. You are now bound by choice. Not law, not power, but soul. Arya exhaled. Tim just nodded. Cool, he said. So, we're like galactic soulmates now. Looks like it. He grinned. Can't wait to see what weirdness phase 3 brings. Arya's smile was a blade and a sunrise all at once. Whatever it is, we face it together. And somewhere in the heart of the stars, something ancient stirred watching. 2 souls once strangers. Now chosen. Now bound. By something greater than power. By love. From the archives of the Cosmic Chronicler 5th millennium of the Galactic Era comes one of the most debated and beloved legends in known history. They call it the Starlight Bond. It begins not with a war, nor with an invasion, nor with a chosen one rising from fire and ruin. No, it begins with a hangover, and a comic book, and a guy named Tim who just wanted to be left alone while he read about a transdimensional toilet that bent causality and made people speak backward. The galaxy would later come to know him by many names. Clint Caldwell, the artifact whisperer, the mechanic of miracles, the last architect. But in that moment, he was just Tim, confused, cranky, and seconds away from being chopped in half by a violet-skinned warrior goddess. Her name was Arya Donnelhell, First Blade of Lowendaria. Bound by ancient law to serve any who bested her in combat, he won by accident. A bone, a gravity glitch, a stumble. And with that, fate tripped over itself and kept falling. What followed was chaos in the most human sense. They bickered. They bonded. They kissed. They rewrote a monarchy. He wielded a mop like a plasma halberd. She nearly killed a dozen bounty hunters just for looking at him the wrong way. He accidentally activated a relic no one believed still worked. She watched him dismantle imperial bureaucracy with one raised eyebrow in a single sarcastic remark. And somewhere along the way, they stopped being conqueror and captive. They became partners, soul-bound not by code or law, but by something the ancients never accounted for: choice. Legends say their love reshaped the Lowendarian Empire not through conquest, but collaboration. They co-ruled from the floating archive of Zenthari, transforming it into both a capital and a sanctuary. Under their leadership, forced servitude was outlawed, including the ancient combat bond laws. Artifact manipulation was regulated for ethics, not just power. Cross-species diplomacy flourished. They refused titles. Arya rejected High Matriarch. She preferred Commander. Tim refused Archlord Caldwell. He answered to Tim, or Clint, or Hey You. Instead, they were known only as the Violet Warrior and the Hidden Guardian. Their children, yes, children bore violet skin, emerald eyes, and minds attuned to artifact frequencies before they could walk. They were legends in their own right. But this story is about their love. About how in a universe obsessed with strength, it was gentleness that truly shattered boundaries. How a warrior who never bowed found someone she wanted to stand beside. How a man who could have ruled chose instead to heal, fix, guide with wrench wit and waffles. There's an old tale that says, when all is lost and the stars begin to fall, look not to kings or fleets, but to the starlight that binds soul to soul. Look for a cargo ship with a cracked hull and a patchy paint job. Inside, a woman with violet skin hums ancient war songs while polishing her blades. And beside her, a man with messy hair and grease-stained fingers flips a page in a comic book, ready to save the galaxy with nothing but love, sarcasm, and the world's last functioning toaster. And somewhere out there, when things go sideways, some swear they catch a glimpse of them, not as rulers, not as warriors, but as a couple laughing in the face of fate, fixing what's broken, one ridiculous situation at a time. Epilogue. Author's note from the Cosmic Chronicler. As I transcribe this final entry on the Starlight Bond, I think of you, yes, you the traveler who stumbled across this story among a sea of darker tales. Perhaps you're drifting between systems, or curled up in a hammock on a quiet asteroid. Maybe you're listening through old audio archives wondering if love like this can really exist. I say it can, because in a galaxy of endless noise, some stories don't scream. They hum, like engine parts finally aligning, like laughter in zero G, like the moment when two people who were never meant to meet somehow fit. Let their story remind you, power can terrify, force can destroy, but only love, real messy, inconveniently human love, can rewrite the rules of the stars. So go, make your own legend. And if one day you hear the soft hum of engines and the clang of tools behind a smirking voice, Arya, can you hand me that plasma wrench? No, the other one, the one that doesn't explode on Tuesdays. Then maybe, just maybe, you found them. Still traveling, still fixing, still bound by starlight. Together.